American politics is so crazy nowadays. We've got Elon Musk, a man who doesn't wash his hands running the Department of War, and a reality TV star as our president. How did we get here? Hi everyone, my name is Hadia and welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all doing well. Today we are going to be talking about how politics became so unhinged and why this might actually be a good thing for the left. So let's get into it.
The robots are here. Our future is no longer science fiction.
There's this article titled Euphemism is Dead, written by Ken Klippenstein, and I thought this was so interesting because he was basically saying, gone are the days of flowery language and politicians who dance around the truth. Now we just have people who say the most unhinged and insane things. And one of the biggest examples of this was Donald Trump renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. We're not even trying to hide what we are doing, and Pete Hegseth, the head of the Department of War, was like, hey, look, we haven't won a war in decades. We didn't win Afghanistan, we didn't win Iraq, we didn't win Korea or Vietnam, and that's why it's imperative we do that now. Now, obviously, this should probably be an example as to why we shouldn't go to war and why it might actually be a bad thing and a waste of money and time and, I don't know, people's lives. But our administration and the state of politics is so unhinged that this statement went completely unnoticed. But I think one of the most interesting things about this article was Klippenstein comparing Trump to Zohran Mamdani. Now, this isn't the first time we've had Trump compared to a really popular leftist figure. Back in 2016, people used to do this with Trump and Bernie Sanders, basically saying that they had a really similar message of economic populism, where Trump wanted to drain the swamp and Bernie wanted to tax the rich, but their ideas of how to go about that was totally different. And now we're seeing Zohran being compared to Trump, but not in their policies or their messaging, but in the way that they phrase things. Both Trump and Zohran are straightforward, blunt, authentic, and very, very honest about the things that they believe. And this is incredibly appealing to voters, and I think it's because they both understand the era of politics that we're in. And Klippenstein perfectly phrases this by saying, we can basically say whatever we want, but the question is, do we have anything worth saying? It's no longer about your policies and how we can accomplish them. It's about what do you stand for and can I get behind it? Now, a lot of people will like to call this litmus testing, but because the state of politics is so unhinged and so crazy, we want something that's going to cut through the noise, and the ideal that each of these politicians are working towards is the thing to cut through it. So Zohran's campaign was about freezing rent. It was about taxing billionaires by 2%. And it's really interesting because Bernie had this issue back in 2016, and even in 2020, everyone was like, oh, well, how are we going to pay for it? But no one really cares about how Zohran's going to go about any of his policies. Instead, they're all like, what do you believe in the first place? What are your values? Can I get behind them? And again, it's because things are so unhinged. And I feel like this is a result of the far-right online space that happened throughout the 2010s. I just think about Jordan Peterson, I think about Ben Shapiro, I think about Steven Crowder, who literally went to like college campuses and were asking literal teenagers to debate gender. You had people like Milo Yiannopoulos touting white supremacist Nazi talking points, and all of this content was so reactionary. And because it was reactionary, people in media actually loved it. And this is what used to drive media, and I would say that it's kind of what's driving the online space right now, but I wouldn't say that it's as prominent anymore, or I wouldn't say that people necessarily care about it all that much. And I think it's because we are so desensitized to these ideas, and also because the Overton window has shifted so far to the right that we can't get any farther right. One really great example of this is the Jubilee video with Mehdi Hassan, where you had that one guy calling himself a fascist, and you also had people being openly racist to him. We no longer have to hide who we are. We don't have to hide the things we believe. We can literally just say them online, and it doesn't matter because cancel culture doesn't exist. And that used to be the hallmark of the far-right online space. Everyone used to say that they were so edgy and they were so contrarian because they were fighting against the liberal agenda. But if we think about the things that people on the right used to fight for, they were actually just fighting for the maintenance of the status quo. They were fighting for the maintenance of white supremacy and racism and patriarchy and sexism and xenophobia and Islamophobia. And yeah, while that might have been edgy and contrarian in a time where liberalism was rising and more social acceptance was being embedded within our laws, like the legalization of gay marriage, it's not really that big of a deal anymore. In fact, Kanye West literally posted a video on X titled Hail Hitler, and no one batted an eye because things are just so crazy right now. And because everything is unhinged and everything is so absurd, we've become desensitized to these ideas, and we're also fully aware of how these ideas, again, are just a maintenance of the status quo, and how these ideas aren't really revolutionary. They're not really going to change anything for the the better. We are also so desensitized to violence, right? A school shooting can happen and we don't really care, it happens all the time, or there's a literal genocide happening in Gaza and no one really cares, even though things like this used to bring the country together and facilitate some sort of change. Now, I'd argue that this numbness is actually good for two reasons. One being it's going to cause the downfall of far-right media. So one of the biggest far-right media spaces online was the Daily Wire. It was Ben Shapiro's online news network, and he had some really popular people on there like Candace Owens, like Steven Crowder. And to be fair, a lot of the most popular people on the Daily Wire have left, but the videos used to amass millions of views, and if you don't know, you get monetized through those views on YouTube. So people thought that they were able to continue to run over the past decade simply because they had like a lot of views and a lot of viewer engagement, but turns out all of the funding actually came from like these far-right billionaires, and now that funding is running out, and turns out people are actually not really watching the Daily Wire, and a lot of the views and a lot of the engagement has actually come from bots, meaning people aren't actually watching Ben Shapiro's content. We can also see this with Joe Rogan. He used to be the #1 podcast, but now he's been replaced by the Midas Touch, which is a liberal podcast. And you also see how pandering to the right is so bad for Democrats. Literally through Kamala Harris's campaign, when she stopped talking about progressive ideas and campaigned with Liz Cheney. And then there's also the I've Had It podcast, which is this podcast with these two white women who used to be like talk show hosts or something, who now have been complaining about the Democratic Party and the middle, and are just kind of like, okay, Democrats, get it together. We are tired of everything that you're doing. We want someone who's actually going to fight back. And their podcast is also increasing in popularity, which I think is so cool. So definitely also check them out. And then we're also seeing Gavin Newsom making fun of the right and making fun of Donald Trump specifically, and the way that he tweets with his own Twitter, where basically he's mimicking everything that Trump does to depict how stupid it looks. And it's really irritating people on the right because they're like, oh my god, what are you doing? Why are you making fun of Trump? But also you look dumb. But again, that's the point, to point out how dumb it looks when you have an elected official acting this way. But back to what I was saying before and why it's so good that everything is crazy and unhinged. This is also like my second reason why it's great. It's because now Democrats can literally say whatever they want and they don't even have to explain why. Again, people complained about Bernie and how we were going to pay for Medicare for all. And I think that as amazing of a politician that he is, he kind of still tried to play by the rules. He still tried to be super nice and he went along with trying to explain things, but that's not something that Zoran does. And that's also not something that Trump does. Like, I remember whenever he fired like all of like the airline traffic controllers, people were like, oh my god, do you think it's a good idea? Like, why did you do this? And he was like, I did it because it was common sense. And that was it. There was literally nothing else, no other reason other than it was common sense. And I think being simple in this era is probably the best thing you can do because most people are dumb. Most people have really short attention spans, and it's not enough to just be reactionary. What you're saying also has to resonate with people, and it has to be simple enough to like get it through their brains. One example that Ken Klippenstein mentions in his article is Kamala Harris saying that she would do nothing different from Joe Biden when it came to Gaza whenever she became president. And even though no one could remember like the specific policies, all they heard was, oh, she said she's going to do nothing. And that one word, nothing, stuck with them. That's why people didn't come out, and that's why people didn't vote for her. Zoran understands this. So one of the biggest hallmarks of his campaign was the rent freeze. People are constantly saying, hey, how are you going to pay for this? But he doesn't sit there and talk about it and explain it. He just talks about why a rent freeze is so important. And again, because there is so much noise out there, we need someone who cuts through it. And the only way to cut through it is by talking about your values. Because if I know that you have this crazy ideal, I know that's something that you are going to continue to fight for, and you're not going to stop at any point in time until we reach it. This is so different than someone who's an incrementalist or a moderate, because that tells me that once you get that little bit of progress that you're fighting for, you're going to stop. But if you're someone who's like, I believe in Medicare for all, I know that you're always going to be fighting for healthcare reform. I know you're not going to stop until we get it. If you want a rent freeze, I know you're always going to be fighting for progressive housing policy. You're always going to want to make my rent more affordable no matter what. But if you say, oh, I think there should be a public and a private option, I know that you'll stop once we get a mediocre public option. And so the question now isn't how are we going to do things, it's just what do you stand for and can I get behind it? I'd argue this is also why people were so irritated with Pete Buttigieg when he was talking about Gaza. He wouldn't say that it was a genocide or an ethnic cleansing or if we were going to stop sending weapons to Israel. He was like, yeah, like obviously we should stop sending like offensive weapons, but defensive weapons are fine, blah, 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 blah. But no one really cared about that. They just wanted to know that he wanted the killing to stop in Gaza. And this is why when Trump says says, we have the best water, we have the best country, we have the strongest military, it really hits because people just want that quick, simple message and they just want to know what your values are and what you believe in. I also want to say that a lot of people on the right are doing to Zoran what people on the left did to Trump back in 2016. One of the biggest reasons why Trump was able to rise to fame is because the left kept giving him a platform. So CNN and MSNBC all thought that he was so ridiculous and that no one would want to vote for him, so they kept putting him on their shows, they kept interviewing him, they kept doing debates with him, and that got him to spread his message to a wider audience, and that ultimately led to his election in the first place. I feel like we're seeing the same thing with Zoran and like people on the right, but also with moderate Democrats, because all Zoran's trying to say is that like this city should be more affordable. And it's so funny because he's literally just running for the mayor of New York City. Like literally no one cared about Pete Buttigieg when he was running as mayor. Like I honestly haven't heard about like any other mayoral campaign, and I've honestly never even heard that much about New York City's mayor up until Zoran started running for it. But everyone's like, oh my god, look at this man who wants to make the city more affordable, this sucks, blah 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 blah. But realistically all they're doing is spreading his message to a larger audience, and I think that's what's ultimately going to lead him to win and to become a significant figure within American politics, even just as mayor, simply because people hate him but keep talking about the things that he believes in, and because most people actually agree with those things and want those things implemented where they live. His ideas are going to continue to become more mainstream, and people are going to want more people like him running as Democratic candidates all across the country. Oh my god, did you guys hear that? So to go back to what Ken Klippenstein said, we can basically say whatever we want, but the question is, do we have anything worth saying? I think Democrats should be as insane as they possibly can. We should say that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. We should say that everyone should have access to healthcare. We should say that we should tax billionaires. Who cares if their money isn't liquid or not? Let's just say that it's important to do it. Let's shift the Overton window to the left, and let's tell people what they should believe in and who the villains in this country really are. Let's fight against the far right narrative, which is literally rooted in stupidity and idiocy, and fight for actual change that's going to be better for everyone in the long run. I want to hear more about environmental policy. I want to hear more about education policy. I actually want even more funding when it comes to the Department of Education. I want people saying that college should be free. I want to see Roe versus Wade reinstated, and I want to see cuts to the military. I want to see cuts to the police budget. I want more electric vehicles. I want better labor laws. I want more immigrants in this country. I want to see gay people everywhere. And if by 2026 I can't wake up and have 6 abortions before ordering a soy milk oat milk latte with my friend who identifies as a non-binary cat, this country is gonna hear about it, okay? Anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you so much for watching my video. Leave down in the comments below what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also subscribe to my Substack where I write really funny satirical articles that I know that you're going to enjoy. If I've left anything out or if there's anything else you want me to talk about, just let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear back from all of you. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you so soon. Bye!
The robots are here. Our future is no longer science fiction.